Poetry Show. Hello. Welcome. The 19th century. Romanticism. England. Nature. John Clare. Poets love nature, and themselves are love, the scorn of fools, and mock of idle pride. The vile in nature worthless deeds approve, they court the vile and spurn all good beside. Poets love nature, like the calm of heaven, her gifts like heaven's love spread far and wide. In all her works there are no signs of leaven, sorrow abashes from her simple pride. Her flowers, her pleasures have their season's birth, and bloom through regions here below. They are her very scriptures upon earth, and teach us simple mirth where'er we go. Even in prison they can solace me, for where they bloom God is, and I am free. I am. I am, yet what I am none cares or knows. My friends forsake me like a memory lost. I am the self-consumer of my woes. They rise and vanish in oblivion's host, like shadows in love, frenzied, stifled throes. Yet I am and live like vapors tossed into the nothingness of scorn and noise, into the living sea of waking dreams, where there is neither sense of life or joys, but the vast shipwreck of my life's esteems. Even the dearest that I love the best are strange, nay, rather stranger than the rest. I long for scenes where man hath never trod, a place where woman never smiled or wept, there to abide my Creator God, and sleep as I in childhood sweetly slept, untroubling and untroubled where I lie, the grass below, above the vaulted sky. 20th century, Canada. Ken Babstock. As marginalia in John Clare's To the Rural Muse. I wasn't finished. From as far back as I can recall, having heard a voice in my skull, I've wanted to die, or change, or die changing. Hexagonal window, the moon penned in it, and a segmented swarm sucking up peonies. Heat off tar shingles in June, as the blood in one arm blackened, thickened, went blearily toxic. I exited Earth up an IV tube. The wall-mounted paper dispenser narrating nightmares of scare. Sores fell from fingers, get well petals, and grew back puce. Slug of little light, the bed rail gleamed. Warmed yogurt, a summons button and visual aphasia. Now I've no spit, no hospice, and admit nothing. Or, for long stretches, only that what happened was all that ever could have happened. Reed's curtain where land becomes lake. If such a limit exists, and ducks aren't taken by pike mid-thought. Thank you, Ken, for that. The Best Canadian Poetry in English, 2011, an anthology edited by Priscilla Uppal and Molly Peacock. More from the same. Dionne Brand, To Golojov's Azul. And I understand from the notes that this was read before a performance by the Toronto Symphony Orchestra of the piece by the same name. In the arid blue hours of any day, feathers and metals float in the deserts, trains disembowel tunnels, night streets attend their clandestine frequencies, barbed reins lace wires of air. Some want serrates the heart. Brittle whistles shrill through threaded beaks. Flights of lilies, flights of curtains, red linen and raw silks escape. Parchment rustles and rests again. Open-armed semazens wheel, jacarandas sprout their petaled cathedrals. There are ceilings and hinges here. There is light at the farthest walls, and furious hummingbirds spinning, billowing silence, numb fires in these rooms. There is too much sadness, lagan and sheets of iridescent fish, pelicans big-mouthed and superstitious, and electric towers hiss their delirium. Caps of high-rises hang in cumulus nimbus. The river sweats acacias and balata, and custard apples wipe their milky tears. Ceiba, buttress, and scale are soft thoughts. The tendencies of brackish wells, sweet, disconsolate, rheas in their flightlessness thrash the ground. If we could pick up our naked feet like them, run over glass and the shrieking emerald of the Aral Sea, horneros in rufous plumage, utter something wise on clayed fence posts, antediluvian telephone poles, the slenderest hours on fashioned cobalt ragas, pyroclastic noons call out from here. Stephen Heighton, Another of the Just. Warrant Office, Hugh Thompson, My Lai. Recognize that name? The My Lai Massacre, Vietnam. Here's a man who did the right thing. Years later, sober, or from inside the snub barrel of a shot glass, you spoke out about it softly, not reticent but baffled. Still, how Callie and his men appeared below you, butchering the villagers, and down you banked your recon chopper to light between him and the enemy women, toddlers, crones. Ordered your door gunners to fire on any comrades who'd resume that riot of infanticide, mob rape, And then, from a midden of twitching limbs, your crew pried free a gore-smeared child and bore him beyond harm, as if to save was also labour for male arms, as if love were the only flag you'd salute. Not quite. You were a keen recruit, proudly hailed patriot. You're gone now, cancer, my sad captain, while Callie, a few years house arrest for 400 dead, lives in Atlanta, retired. Don't do something in hope of reward, you said. It might never come. Only lynch mail, roadkill, razored strays splayed at your door. Still, in the aged orange skies, your angelic contrail lingers. You at the flight stick, bearing the one child. Forget the pen, forget the sword. The strongest hands hold neither, but they hold. David McGimpsey. My life as a Canadian writer. Slight change of pace here. My first short story, The Provincial Fair, was rejected 25 times before it found its home in the Muskoka Review. From then on, it's been all pretty easy. I learned the beauty of socialism from writers so passionate they'd cry when they didn't get a grant. We'd go north and laugh at the thought of Alden Nolan. Yes, I have been on the radio. If you heard that segment of Canada Reads where a guy recommends the novel version of Tom Cruise's Top Gun, that was me. Now I live and work in Montreal. All we do is sit in cafes and talk through the one remaining question of literature. Is it available for free on the internet? We've enjoyed Billy Collins a few times here on the Poetry Show. And again from his early book, Questions About Angels. The Norton Anthology of English Literature. It is easy to find out if a poet is a contemporary poet and thus avoid the imbroglio of calling him Victorian or worse, Elizabethan, or worse yet, medieval. If you look him up in the Norton Anthology of English Literature, and the year of his birth is followed only by a dash, and a small space for the numerals only spirits know, then it is safe to say that he is probably alive. Perhaps out walking in a pale coat, inhaling the night air, alive and contemporary as he lights a cigarette, and the smoke billows forth like an amorphous thought, dissipating over the cold, barge-heavy river he is steering into. But if the dash in the book is followed by another year, he is not contemporary. Perhaps he is nothing at all, saves what remains on the few pages there for you to read, and maybe read over again. Read aloud to an empty room. Did you know that it is possible, if you read a poem enough times, if you read it over and over without stopping, that you can make the author begin to spin gently, even affectionately, in his grave? History is busy tonight in the freezing cemetery, carving death dates in stone with a hammer and chisel, and closing those parentheses that are used to embrace our lives, as if we were afterthoughts dropped into a long sentence. In the light of all this, I am thankful that I can even see history standing there holding her allegorical tools. And I am amazed at how tall and solemn she looks, and how immaculate are her robes. I think we are afterthoughts dropped into a long sentence. But it doesn't bother me. Does it bother Billy? Well, perhaps we'll ask him one day. Marilyn Gear Pilling. Billy Collins interviewed on stage at Chautauqua. Billy Collins says you can't have people in your poems. It can only be you and your reader. You think of all the people in your poems, your Aunt Evelyn, your mother, your friends Linda and Dick and Ross, John Porter, your mother. Billy Collins says your job as a poet is to give your reader pleasure. You thought giving pleasure was your job in sex. Your reader's crotch is the one thing you never worried about. Billy Collins says sometimes he takes his penis off when he writes a poem. You wonder what his penis does when it knows its master is writing. Goes to bars, appears for Margaret Atwood as a remote signature pen. Billy Collins says strangers don't care about your thoughts and feelings. You want to put up your hand, tell them about the woman behind you. You came an hour early to sit in the front row and discovered you'd forgotten your reading glasses. You were so desperate at the prospect of an hour doing nothing that you turned around and asked a row of strangers if anyone had extra reading glasses. The woman behind you lent you her brand new pair. But he's back on pleasure. He says how you give your reader pleasure is form. Dusty old form. Grade 10 sticking it to your varnished wooden seat iambic pentameter. You're still mulling that when Roger Rosenblatt asks Billy Collins why he didn't become a jazz musician. Billy Collins says he wishes he had become a jazz musician. He wouldn't have to be on stage answering these questions. So much for that egg over easy persona of the poems, eh? Now he's saying no decent poet ever knows the ending of a poem he's writing. You think sadly of all those endings you thought of in the shower, even though you know Billy Collins won't care about your feelings, and you know you shouldn't use an adverb in a poem. Then Roger Rosenblatt asks Billy Collins, what is the importance of poetry? Billy Collins sits up and says, straight, poetry is optional. That's right, reader. Billy Collins, former poet laureate of the United States, is sitting here on stage saying poetry is optional. And you thought people died for lack of what is found there. Wait a minute. Something is happening on stage. Billy Collins is fed up. Billy Collins is leaving, unclipping his wings. They're black, just so you know, like his suit. Billy Collins has the wingspan of a frigate bird. There he goes, rising, riding the currents of institutionalized sublimity, beating his way across the ceiling beneath the track of lighting, brushing the stars and stripes aside. He's off to find his roving mojo. You sigh and think about going home. You'll have to rub out all those people in your poems. You'll have to have a cold shower, and whenever you feel an ending coming on, you think sadly, okay, adverbially, about your Aunt Evelyn. How much you loved her. How proudly she wore her mustache to church. I'd wear my mustache to church, if I ever went to church. Richard Wilbur, esteemed American poet, his latest volume, Anterooms. short lyric, flying. Treetops are not so high, nor I so low, that I don't instinctively know how it would be to fly through gaps that the wind makes when the leaves arouse and there is a lifting of boughs that settle and lift again. Whatever my kind may be, it is not absurd to confuse myself with a bird for the space of a reverie. My species never flew, but somehow I know it is something that long ago I almost adapted to. Psalm. Give thanks for all things on the plucked lute, and likewise the harp of 10 strings. Have the lifted horn greatly blare, and pronounce it good to have been born. Lend the breath of life to the stops of the sweet flute or capering fife, and tell the deep drum to make at the right juncture pandemonium. Then in grave relief praise to our sorrows on the cello of shared grief. I was charmed to discover yet another translation of Stéphane Mallarmé, one of my all-time favorites. I think you lovers of poetry show will know by now. Richard Wilbur's had a go, and a jolly good Joe he has had. The poem is The Tomb of Edgar Poe. Changed by eternity to himself at last, the poet, with the bare blade of his mind, thrusts at a century which had not divined death's victory in his voice, and is aghast. Aroused like some vile hydra of the past, when an angel proffered pure words to mankind, men swore that drunken squalor lay behind his magic potions and the spells he cast. The wars of earth and heaven, oh endless grief, if we cannot sculpt them from a bas relief to ornament the dazzling tomb of Poe. Calm block here, fallen from some far disaster. Then let this boundary stone at least say no to the dark flights of blasphemy hereafter. To the dark flights of blasphemy hereafter. Oh, yes. Thank you, Richard Wilbur. Thank you to all the poets. Thank you to all the editors. The elegance of conversation continues throughout eternity. The charm, the humor, the chit-chat. And the flutes and the vibraphones.